The wind was cold that December morning in 1903, sweeping across the sand dunes of Kitty Hawk with the kind of harshness that made most men pack up and go home. But not the two brothers standing beside a strange wooden machine perched on a narrow launch rail. Their clothes were simple, their equipment was crude, and their chances, at least according to every scientist, engineer, and newspaper editor in America, were zero. Flying was impossible. The human body was too heavy, the engines were too weak, and the sky was a place meant only for birds. Yet the Wright brothers didn't care what people said. They cared about one thing: solving a problem nobody else could solve. And on that cold morning, when Orville Wright lay down on the bottom wing of the flyer and released the restraining wire, the world quietly shifted. As the machine crept forward and lifted off the rail, it didn't soar gracefully. It climbed awkwardly, shaking like a newborn calf. For 12 seconds, it stayed in the air, covering just 120 feet a distance, so short you could walk it in half a minute. But that 12 seconds changed the future of humanity more than almost any moment in the modern age, because that short, stuttering flight proved that powered, controlled, sustained flight was not fantasy, it was real. And once something is proven possible, it becomes inevitable. The world was never the same after that moment, even though only 5 people stood there to witness it. To understand how we reached that point, you have to go back long before the Wrights. Humans had been dreaming of the sky for centuries. Ancient myths spoke of gods and mortals soaring on wings, and Leonardo da Vinci filled notebooks with sketches of flying machines that would have looked at home in a museum of the future. Hot air balloons drifted gently above European fields in the 1700s, and gliders launched off hillsides throughout the 1800s. But the real barrier wasn't making something that could float or glide. The true challenge was control. You had to be able to steer, balance, and stabilize a machine in the air. Otherwise, you weren't flying, you were crashing gracefully. Dozens of inventors learned that lesson the hard way. That was the genius of the Wright brothers. They weren't the wealthiest, they weren't university engineers, and they weren't backed by governments. They were bicycle mechanics from Ohio. But they understood something almost everyone else ignored. Human flight wasn't just about power, it was about balance. If you couldn't control the machine, it didn't matter how big your engine was. They studied the way birds adjusted their wings in flight. They built wind tunnels in their shop to test different wing shapes. They experimented relentlessly with gliders, crashing over and over until they had a system that worked. Wing warping, elevator control, rudder steering. They invented the first true 3-axis control system, something so fundamental every airplane in the world still uses a version of it today. Once the Flyer proved itself in 1903, everything accelerated. Within a decade, the world had gone from a wooden machine flying 12 seconds to airplanes made of metal frames reaching thousands of feet in the air. World War I turned airplanes from curiosities into weapons. Suddenly, nations were racing to build faster, stronger machines. Open cockpit biplanes became scouts, fighters, and bombers. Air combat became a deadly sport of innovation, where the side with better airplanes often gained the upper hand. After the war, pilots returned home and started barnstorming, putting on air shows and landing aircraft in fields across America. People paid a few dollars to go up for a ride in an open cockpit, feeling the wind tear at their clothes. It was dangerous, thrilling, and unforgettable, and it sparked public fascination. Air travel for passengers began in the 1920s and 1930s, but it wasn't glamorous at first. Seats were stiff, cabins were loud, and the planes themselves often rattled with every gust of wind. But they were faster than trains and could cross distances that once took days in a matter of hours. Airmail routes stitched across the country, with brave pilots flying through storms, darkness, and uncharted landscapes. The Douglas DC-3 arrived in 1935 and rewrote the rules. It was comfortable, reliable, and efficient. Many historians say that DC-3 created modern passenger aviation because for the first time, airlines could actually make money carrying people instead of mail. Then came the Second World War, and aviation leaped forward again. The demand for reliable, rugged aircraft forced manufacturers to innovate at record speed. Metal skins replaced fabric, engines became more powerful, navigation systems improved, radar changed military strategy, and at the end of the war came something nobody had seen before, the jet engine. Suddenly, planes weren't limited by propellers. They could climb higher, go faster, and cross continents in a fraction of the time. When peace returned, those technologies flowed into commercial aviation. The 1950s and 1960s became the golden age of flight. The Boeing 707 and Douglas DC-8 shrank the world. A trip from New York to London went from an ocean voyage to a 7-hour flight. Airports transformed into modern hubs. International travel exploded as people realized they could see the world without spending weeks on ships. This shift didn't just change tourism, it changed the global economy. Food, medicine, electronics, newspapers, business executives, and skilled workers could move between cities and continents faster than ever. Countries that were once isolated became connected. Cultural exchange accelerated. Businesses expanded worldwide. It's no exaggeration to say that modern globalization owes its existence to the jet engine. In 1970, Boeing introduced the 747, the Queen of the Skies. With its massive hump and double-deck design, it could carry hundreds of passengers across oceans with ease. Suddenly, travel was not just for the wealthy. It was for families, workers, students, and anyone with a dream to go somewhere new. The world became smaller, and economies became larger. Airlines grew into global giants, and aviation became one of the largest industries on Earth, supporting millions of jobs and touching nearly every sector, from manufacturing to tourism to international trade. While commercial aviation expanded, innovation continued behind the scenes. Engineers developed composite materials to make airplanes lighter and stronger. Fly-by-wire systems replaced mechanical cables, allowing computers to assist in flight control. Navigation moved from maps and compasses to GPS satellites, guiding aircraft with astonishing precision. Engines became so efficient that some modern jets could cross the entire Pacific Ocean on a single tank of fuel. Safety systems evolved to the point that flying became statistically safer than driving to the airport. Every part of the modern airplane, from its wings to its engines to its control systems, represents millions of hours of engineering, testing, and refinement. Air travel became the backbone of global commerce. Every day, tens of thousands of flights carry goods around the world. Fresh flowers from Kenya to Europe, microchips from Taiwan to Texas, vaccines from Germany to South America. Fish caught in the morning in Japan appear the same day in restaurants in Los Angeles. The global economy runs on wings, and without aviation, supply chains collapse, businesses stall, and countries grind to a halt. Yet even with more than a century of innovation behind us, aviation is still evolving. Electric aircraft are starting to appear, promising quieter, cleaner regional flights. AI co-pilots are being tested to assist or someday replace human pilots on long routes. Autonomous cargo planes may soon operate around the clock, reducing transport costs. Hypersonic passenger aircraft are in development, aiming to cross the Atlantic in 90 minutes instead of 7 hours. And on the horizon are aircraft that can reach the edge of space before gliding back down. Tools that blur the line between aviation and rocketry. When you look back at the long arc of history, it's remarkable to think it all started with two brothers on a windy beach pushing a fragile machine toward an uncertain fate. They didn't have advanced tools or million-dollar budgets. They had curiosity, persistence, and the willingness to fail until they figured it out. Their work sparked a century of innovation that reshaped the world. Airplanes didn't just change how we travel, they changed the structure of the global economy, the flow of culture, the movement of goods, and the limits of human possibility. And as the next chapter of aviation unfolds, one thing is certain: innovation never stops. The same spirit that pushed two bicycle mechanics into the sky is still alive today, driving engineers, dreamers, and pioneers to push beyond the horizon and imagine what comes next. If you enjoyed this journey through the history of flight, hit the like button, subscribe, and join me in the next story. There's a lot more coming, and you won't want to miss what's taking off next.